If I could go back in time and sit across from myself at 18, before the car I couldn't afford, before the credit card I should never have opened, before the years I wasted not investing because I kept telling myself I'd start later, I wouldn't give advice. I'd give rules, not suggestions, not tips, rules. Non-negotiable, permanent. The kind of rules you tattoo on your arm, so you'd see them every single morning before you made another decision with your money. And here's the thing that makes this hurt. Every single one of the 10 rules I'm about to share with you is something I learned the hard way. Every one of them cost me real money, real time, or real sleep. You don't have to pay that price, but you do have to stay for all 10. Because number 7 is the one that would have changed everything if I'd known it a decade earlier. Hey everybody, it's Billy. And today we're doing something different. This isn't a tips video. This isn't 10 things you should probably do with your money. This is the conversation I wish someone had forced me to sit through when I was 18 years old, before I'd made a single financial decision that mattered. Because here's what I figured out after years of getting it wrong and then slowly getting it right. Most people aren't bad with money because they're careless. They're bad with money because they're performing. They're putting on a show. The car, the clothes, the lifestyle, the restaurant posts. And the show is so expensive that there's nothing left to actually build with. The public version of their financial life says, I'm doing fine. The private version, the one only their bank account knows, tells a completely different story. Today I'm giving you the 10 rules that end the performance and start the build. And I need to warn you about something before we start. One of these lessons, the one about your first $100,000, is going to make you uncomfortable because it says the thing that no other finance video will say about compound interest. Don't skip it. It's the most honest thing you'll hear about money this year. Let's get into it. Problem challenge. Why most people stay broke at every income level. Before we get to the 10 rules, I need you to understand something that took me years to figure out. Being broke isn't an income problem. It's a behavior problem. And the proof is everywhere. There are people earning $40,000 a year who are steadily building wealth. And there are people earning $200,000 a year who are one missed paycheck away from panic. The difference isn't the number on their salary. It's the gap between what they earn and what they perform. I call it the performance gap. It's the distance between your actual financial position and the financial position you're projecting to the world. The wider that gap, the more fragile your life is. A big salary with a big performance gap is just a more expensive version of being broke. You've got more money coming in and more money going out, and the net result is the same. Nothing saved, nothing invested, nothing built. Every lesson I'm about to give you is a tool for closing that gap, for making the private version of your money match the public version, for stopping the show and starting the build. Here we go. Lesson 1. If you can't buy it twice, you can't afford it once. This is the delayed gratification rule, and it's the foundation underneath everything else. Here's how it works. Before you buy anything that isn't a necessity, ask yourself, could I buy 2 of these right now and still feel fine? If the answer is no, you can't actually afford it. You just have enough money in your account to make it disappear. There's a massive difference between having the money and being able to afford it. Having the money means the transaction will go through. Being able to afford it means the transaction won't damage your financial position. A $500 gaming console costs $500. But if spending $1,000 wouldn't make you blink, the purchase is fine. If it would, you're stealing from your future self to entertain your present self. I almost learned this the hard way with a career decision. I was working in monetization at a mobile gaming company when marketing offered me a role with a $20,000 raise. The short-term version of me was screaming yes, but I applied this same thinking to the decision. Where do I want to be in 20 years? The answer wasn't in marketing. That extra $20,000 would have felt great for a few months and derailed my long-term trajectory for years. Sometimes the best financial decision doesn't put more money in your pocket right now. Sometimes it protects the money your future self is counting on. Lesson 2. Track 3 numbers. That's it. You don't need to track every penny. That's exhausting, and most people quit within 2 weeks. Instead, track 3 numbers monthly. what I call the big three: your total expenses, your savings rate, and your net worth. Your fixed expenses, housing, transport, utilities, insurance, should stay below 60% of your income. If they're above that, the maths of building wealth literally doesn't work. You've squeezed out all the room. For discretionary spending, use what I call the midpoint check-in. If your monthly discretionary budget is $1,500, check on the 15th. If you've already burned through $900, you know to slow down for the rest of the month. No spreadsheet drama. Just one honest check at the halfway mark. Your savings rate is where the magic happens. Start at 10% of your income and push it up over time. When you track it monthly, it turns saving from a sacrifice into a score. You're not depriving yourself, you're winning. Net worth is the long view. Check it monthly, not daily. Daily checking leads to emotional decisions, which are the enemy of everything we're building here. Monthly gives you perspective. Yearly gives you proof that it's working. Lesson 3. Stop over-diversifying. 1 to 3 funds is enough. This one goes against what most people believe, so hear me out. You do not need 15 different investments to be diversified. In fact, over-diversification is one of the most common mistakes I see. People think they're being smart by spreading money across a dozen ETFs, but half of those funds hold the same stocks. You're not diversifying. You're just making your portfolio harder to manage. The S&P 500 alone contains 500 of the largest companies across every major sector. One fund. Instant diversification across the entire economy. Add an international fund and a bond fund if you want, and you've got a portfolio that outperforms most professionals. Speaking of professionals, over the past 15 years, casual investors who simply bought and held an S&P 500 index fund beat 92% of professional fund managers. People with teams of analysts, decades of experience, and sophisticated models. Beaten by the most boring strategy imaginable. Simplicity wins. Every additional fund you add creates more decisions, more fees, and more chances to do something emotional and stupid when the market dips. The goal isn't the most sophisticated portfolio. It's the most effective one. Lesson 4. Never borrow money to buy something that's losing value. Depreciating assets are financial quicksand, and financing them is like paying someone to push you deeper. Cars, watches, phones, furniture, clothes. These things lose value the moment you buy them and keep losing value every day you own them. When you finance a depreciating asset, you're paying interest on something that's guaranteed to be worth less tomorrow. You're not just losing the depreciation. You're paying a premium for the privilege of losing money. That couch you bought for $2,000 3 years ago? You'd be lucky to sell it for $200. Now imagine you financed it at 18% interest. You didn't just lose $1,800. You paid hundreds more in interest for the pleasure of watching your purchase become worthless. The only time borrowing makes sense is for appreciating assets, things that gain value over time, or when the borrowed money generates more income than the interest costs. Everything else, cash. And only after it passes the buy it twice test from lesson 1. This is the rule that would have saved me the most money if I'd known it at 18. The car I financed straight out of school was worth less than I owed on it within a year. I was literally underwater on a machine that was rusting in my driveway. That lesson cost me thousands. Yours costs you 60 seconds of this video. Lesson 5. 20 years changes everything. If you can commit to investing for more than 20 years, history says you will make money. Not might. Will. Over any 20-year period in U.S. stock market history, including periods that started during the Great Depression. Investors who held broad market index funds earned positive real returns when dividends are included. This is why timing the market is a waste of energy for long-term investors. In 2012, financial publications everywhere were screaming that the market was overvalued by 50%. The S&P 500 was around 1,400. If you'd listened to those warnings and stayed on the sidelines, you would have missed the market nearly quadrupling from that point. The lesson isn't that markets can't crash. They can and they will. The lesson is that for someone with a 20-plus year horizon, trying to predict when those crashes happen is less important than just staying in and adding money consistently. Time in the market beats timing the market. That's not a cliche. It's a mathematical fact backed by over a century of data. Lesson 6. Your first $100,000 is a grind and nobody tells you that. All right, this is the uncomfortable one I warned you about. Every finance video shows you the compound interest curve, the one that goes flat, 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 and then shoots up like a rocket. It's exciting, it's motivating, and it's hiding the most important truth about building wealth. The flat part of that curve? That's you. For years. Putting money in and watching almost nothing happen. Your first $100,000 will be comprised almost entirely of money you saved, not money the market earned for you. If you save $1,300 a month at a 7.5% return, you'll hit $100,000 after about 6 years. But 77% of that $100,000 is money you physically deposited. The compound interest everyone talks about? It contributed less than a quarter. This is the part that makes people quit. They start investing, check their balance after 6 months, see it's barely moved, and think it's not working. It is working. You're just in the flat part. And the flat part is the price of admission to the rocket part. Here's why this matters so much. In the beginning, your investment strategy barely matters. What matters is your savings rate. Every extra dollar you save during the grind phase has decades to compound. Every dollar you don't save is gone forever. This is why increasing your income and cutting expenses matters way more than finding the perfect ETF when you're starting out. Nobody tells you the flat part is coming because the flat part doesn't get clicks. But knowing it's coming is the difference between quitting at year 2 and being a millionaire at year 25. The grind is the only road to the curve. And now you know. Lesson 7. Make investing boring. If your investment strategy is exciting, you're doing it wrong. If it keeps you up at night checking your phone, you're doing it wrong. If it makes you feel smart, anxious, or like you're living in a movie, you're definitely doing it wrong. The most successful investors I know have literally forgotten their account passwords. They automated their contributions, chose broad index funds, and then walked away. They check maybe once or twice a year. The rest of the time, they focus on earning more and saving more. The things they can actually control. There's a quote from Morgan Housel that rewired my brain on this. The variable he wants to maximize in his investments isn't returns. It's endurance. He believes that earning average returns for an above-average period of time puts you in the top 5% of all investors. Think about that. Top 5%. Not by being brilliant, by being boring, by being patient, by refusing to touch it. The boring approach eliminates the emotional overhead that destroys most portfolios. No daily decisions. No panic selling during dips. No chasing hot stocks because someone on social media made it look easy. You make a few simple choices at the beginning, automate the process, and then get on with your life. It's not glamorous, but wealth building rarely is. Lesson 8. Stop comparing. Start building. Comparison is the most expensive habit you have, and you probably don't even realize you're doing it. Every time you see someone's car, holiday, or apartment on social media and feel a twinge of I should have that too, that feeling has a price tag. Because what follows that feeling is a purchase you didn't need, funded by money that should have been invested. Here's what you're not seeing behind those posts: the debt, the anxiety, the credit card statements. Nobody shows you their bank balance. Nobody captions their holiday photo with, I put this on a card I can't pay off. You're comparing your full financial picture, including the stress, to someone else's highlight reel, and then making decisions based on that false comparison. When I stopped comparing, my impulse purchases dropped dramatically. Because most impulse buying isn't about wanting the thing. It's about wanting the status the thing signals. And when you stop caring about signaling, you suddenly realize how little you actually need to be happy. That shift saves more money than any budgeting app ever will. Lesson 9. Don't be a 30K millionaire. This is the trap that catches people at every income level. A 30K millionaire is someone who earns $30,000 but lives like they make millions. Leases a car they can't afford. Lives in housing that eats 70% of their income. Prioritizes looking successful over actually becoming successful. And this pattern scales. There are 30K millionaires earning $200,000 a year. The numbers are bigger, but the behavior is identical. Every dollar goes to the performance, nothing goes to the build. The BMW, the bottle service, the designer clothes, the apartment with the view. It looks incredible from the outside. And behind it there's a zero in the savings account and a growing credit card balance. Research consistently shows that most actual millionaires live well below their means. Reliable used cars, modest homes. No status signaling. They understood something early that most people never figure out. Looking wealthy and being wealthy are opposite strategies. Every dollar you spend on the performance is a dollar that can't compound. Every dollar you save by dropping the act is a dollar that works for you while you sleep. The best line I've ever read on this comes from The Millionaire Next Door. If your goal is to become financially secure, you'll likely attain it. But if your motive is to make money to spend money on the good life, you're never going to make it. That's it. That's the whole game. Lesson 10. What's risky for you might not be risky for someone else. The final rule. And in some ways the most important one is this. Your financial decisions need to be yours, not your friends, not some influencers, not your parents. Yours. Your risk tolerance, your timeline, your income stability, and your personal circumstances are unique to you. A 25-year-old with a stable job and no dependents can take risks that would be reckless for a 55-year-old with kids in college. A freelancer with irregular income needs a bigger emergency fund than someone with a government salary. The advice that's perfect for one person can be a disaster for another. This includes the advice in this video. Every lesson I've shared is a principle, not a commandment. The principles are broad, live below your means, invest for the long term, avoid financing depreciating assets, stop performing wealth you don't have. Those apply to almost everyone. But the specific numbers, how much to save, where to invest, what risks to take, need to be filtered through your own situation. Developing that judgment takes time. But it starts with understanding the why behind each rule, not just the what. When you understand why delayed gratification works, you can apply it to decisions nobody could have predicted for you. When you understand why boring investing wins, you won't panic during the next crash, even if everyone around you is selling. The goal isn't to follow a script someone else wrote for their life. The goal is to write your own. Using principles that work, applied to a reality that's yours. The real cost of not knowing. Let me pull this all together. If I could go back to 18-year-old me. The version who financed a car he couldn't afford, who spent money to look successful instead of building something real, who didn't invest for years because later always felt safer than now. I wouldn't give him a lecture. I'd give him these 10 rules. And I'd tell him something I wish someone had told me. The performance is the trap. The grind is the path. The boring stuff is the stuff that works. And every year you waste performing instead of building is a year of compound interest you never get back. You now have something most people don't get until they've already made the expensive mistakes. The rules before the game starts. You know that delayed gratification is the foundation. That 3 numbers tell you everything. That simple portfolios beat complex ones. That financing depreciating assets is financial self-harm. That 20 years of patience changes everything. That the first 100,000 is a grind, and that's okay. That boring investing wins. That comparison is a wealth destroyer. That performing wealth is the opposite of building it. And that your financial decisions need to be yours. That's not 10 tips. That's an operating system for the rest of your financial life. Start with 1 or 2 of these that hit hardest for your situation right now. Implement them this week. Not perfectly. Just consistently. Small changes compound over time just like money does. And often, the simplest rules produce the best long-term results. The most important thing is to start where you are with what you have. You don't need a big salary. You don't need a finance degree. You don't need to overhaul your entire life by Monday. You just need to close the performance gap, one decision at a time, and let the boring, consistent, unsexy work of building wealth do what it always does when you give it enough time. I'm Billy, and I probably spend too much time thinking about why the most expensive thing in most people's financial lives isn't their rent or their car payment. It's the gap between who they actually are with money and who they're pretending to be. If that reframe just shifted something, subscribe, because that's exactly what we dig into here.